I have the Tim here, and of course, the dynamic Tim, both you and I have our warts, but we try to do the best we can with our warts. We interrupt each other sometimes. I can get in what I can
No, not me. That's a lie made up by my competition.
I tend to rant and pontificate, but I hope people will get something positive out of it. And if they really want to clarify, they can actually call into the show any hour except for the first hour Friday when I'm answering people's wellness health questions. Or just tell a board op, even if you don't want to come in here. I'd like them to clarify this or that. You can call the 800 number, 800-259-5791. We now are also going to be doing, after the show today, we'll be doing regular updates to one of our events, geopolitical stuff for your blog, up on our live stream premium channel called Deagle Network TV live stream, which is a new premium channel. It's next to the top in terms of premium channels. It is really amazing. And this information, you can search on Google. You can find it. These videos are all free for anybody in the world. I paid for everything. So you don't need to go and buy membership. Anybody, you don't have to even buy a product. You can actually go on our website and see these videos. So let's go through some of the news, Tim.
Well, in Europe, and this is a rather shocking thing, and it highlights exactly where Merkel and the globalists and the Karzarian mafia are taking us. In Germany, German police have raided 10 homes because the people posted anti-migrant comments on social media like Twitter or something. Talk about fascism. If you're upset because your daughter or wife, or maybe yourself, if you're a woman, or were sexually groped or something by some of these Muslims, or raped, or who knows what, or feel they're in danger if they go out of the house, and you have the audacity, the absolute audacity to be so politically incorrect as to say, we've got to stop this. This is outrageous. Our people aren't safe in our country. Well, then the police come in like stormtroopers and raid your house, your apartment.
Yeah,
and I mean,
now let's put it this way. I live in Vista, California, and there's parts of the country which we call democratic, progressive hellholes, literally. And do you think they get away with that in Vista with the number of Marines per square yard and armed people here in our county? And by the way, San Diego is a completely different world.
Well, that's why our founding fathers made sure that we get to have guns to protect ourselves against.
I'm going to give a warning to any Muslim mosques in San Diego County. You pull anything off, and you're going to have about 2 heartbeats before you face plant and die, and meet Allah and find out He ran out of virgins and boys with skin like pearls.
Well, on that note, Dr. Bill, I have on my blog, and by the way, if you want to go to people, just Google Lord Sterling Europe, and it'll take you right there. But America's coming Muslim crisis. Muslims ushered in from Muslim nations, double those people coming in from America. Interesting, the United States issues twice as many green cards to migrants from Muslim-majority countries than from Europe. Here's the specifics. From 2009 to 2013, the U.S. issued 680,000 green cards to migrants from Muslim countries, more than twice the approximately 270,000 green cards issued to migrants from European countries. And green cards entitle migrants to legal permanent residence in the country and work authorization, federal benefits, and a chance to apply for citizenship. Is that nuts?
No, it's not nuts. It's evil. We need to start calling things what they are. We're not talking about just misguided people or stupid people. We're talking about evil people. Obama's evil. Angela Merkel's evil. The globalists are evil. George Soros is evil. He reminds me of the Baron Harkonnen for the movie Dune, who's in what they call gravity suits. He sits in a wheelchair. He's got oxygen. He probably makes snortly sounds like, Darth Vader. Get my people at the Orange Revolution on. The progressivism is coming against opposition. I mean, George Soros, the only reason why he's not dead is because Satan hasn't got his suite finished yet in hell.
Well, George Soros is one of the chief operatives for the Rothschild Empire.
Right.
And this multiculturalism that's being crammed down our throats, and gay, lesbian, transgendered nonsense, is all part of a plan to destroy European and pan-European cultures, religion, societies, economies. Let me read a little quote here from Barbara Lerner, Spectre. And she says, Europe, quote, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural, and I think we are going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation to Europe for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role.
Yeah.
But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive, end quote. Now, I have to tell you, that is so warped and so evil and so twisted and so nuts.
Tim, I want to insert some important information here in what you just said. The word Jewish, if you go to ancient Hebrew, means praiser. When they marched around Jericho, guess who were in the first of the 12 tribes marching around with their musical instruments because they were musicians and praisers? The Jews. And the Jews, the reason, that's why it says, out of my praises comes the Lord. In other words, Jesus actually descended and came to earth to incarnate in human flesh. That's why his name is Emmanuel, God with us, through the Jewish line, because he said God inhabits his praise, okay? So when you praise God, God's there. Now, the current people that call themselves Jews, most of them are Khazarians, are just Satanists. They just shouldn't use the term Jew, as Jesus said to them face to face, to the Sadducees and Pharisees, you are of the synagogue of Satan. They're not Jews. If you take the word Jew, it means you praise the King of Wisdom, the Most High God.
He also said false Jews. Jews are not Jews.
These are not Jews, okay? Now, the Jews are actually the half-tribe of Benjamin, which to build up the house of. And Jewish means praise the Most High single God. Not Satan, not Moloch, not Baal, not, Ashtoreth. The six-pointed star of the so-called Jewish star is not the Jewish sign. It's a sign of the fertility goddess of the spring. And it's interesting.
According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the six-pointed star was an occult star.
Right, that's the sign of
adapted
Ashtoreth.
in the late 1800s by the Zionists.
Right. Now, the problem is, you see, that star is called the Star of Ashtoreth, a fertility goddess where they sacrifice to Moloch and Baal. And remember, these ceremonies of these gates...
Baal, as in the...
Let me finish. The gates are the gates to Baal, which is the solar sun god, starts on the 19th, which is a whole series of 13 days to the ceremony of Beltane. And the first day is called the day of the beast. And the sacrificial day of Moloch. And it says in the book of Genesis, thou shalt not make thy children walk through the fires of Moloch and Baal, for I, the Lord God, has said it. In other words, you don't sacrifice your children. If they didn't, what they do is they make sweetbreads to the Queen of Heaven, which they call, which is Lilith, which either way his name is Hillary Clinton, I mean. And and they sweetbreads when
I think you got the upstairs confused with the downstairs. I would call her Queen of Hell, but go ahead.
Queen of Hell, but anyway, I asked God years ago when I was traveling around the country to 42 cities in Israel to give me an image to tell people exactly what the apostasy is. And God gave me this standing vision. So I'm in there and I have standing vision. And I'm back in ancient Israel, and there's a higher hill where the tent of meeting is, and the 3 million plus Hebrew tribes have left, Egypt. And I could hear the man speaking in Hebrew, but I understood him in English, which is really amazing. And they came to Moses and said, please have God stop speaking to us in the pillar of fire and in the pillar of smoke. And he tore his gowns, and he said, I know it, because I could smell you cooking sweetbreads to the Queen of Heaven, for you have had lascivious sex 9 months earlier, and you're going to sacrifice your children, or a proxy, which are these sweetbreads, made in the shape of gingerbread babies, to the Queen of Heaven, to Moloch and Baal.
That were gingerbread?
Let's rock and roll here. Bernie Sanders, and I'd like to frame things because I think metaphors are useful. He's an American Bolshevik. This is a throwback to the Russian Revolution that killed probably 85 to 100 million Russians over a number of different purges that occurred over the last century. Putin is a man who does not honor the, quote, the gods of his fathers, which are communist atheists. He's considered almost like a walking saint in the Russian Orthodox Church. He's considered a protector of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia. What's going on now is we have a Christian nation, which is Russia, speaking to basically a secular agnostic nation, which is America, which is what Obama pronounced, saying we're no longer a Christian nation, because he's tried to make it such. And we hear the words of the American Bolshevik, Bernie Sanders. It horrifies me, because what's coming is the annihilation of the state of America. And if America goes down, which is a god...
we were talking on the break. Paul Ryan, the latest studies show that the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, were he to receive the GOP nomination in a fixed convention, he would lose to either Clinton or Sanders. Now, yesterday, I listened to Bernie Sanders, maybe 10 minutes, maybe not quite 10 minutes, of his winning speech in Wisconsin. And I don't like Bernie Sanders, but I have said a few things positive about him, not very many, but I've said, he says some things that I agree with. Well, after listening to him, I'm not going to say anything kind about that jerk ever again. In that 10 minutes or less, 3 different times, he talked about, now men and women, we can get married, men can marry men, and women can marry women in all 50 states. And he was talking about gay and lesbian and transgendered rights and all this. Several times in less than 10 minutes. And it's one thing to be tolerant of human beings. People who are often homosexual, they can't help it. They've had trauma in their past. There's some problems. I happen to think it's a spiritual sickness as well as a psychological sickness.
It's a mental illness. It's a mental illness as well.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It's one thing to be tolerant, but when you're pushing an agenda, particularly on young people, people in grade school and so forth, you're pushing an agenda. Oh, it's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's just as good as being heterosexual. No, it's not. That's why only 2% maybe of the people are that way. It's not. But when people like Bernie Sanders and Clinton, and this is in every speech of hers multiple times, this lesbian, gay, transgendered, pushing. I mean, what? They've already got that tiny percentage of the vote, for crying out loud. Right. They're using their bully pulpit to push this satanic agenda, and I just can't stand people that do that, because I know what they're doing. It's so demonic, it's so wicked, and it's so designed to destroy this country and our social fabric. These guys are Satanists. They're dirt.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, of course, they push things like this festival on the 20th of March, for example, where they have this Dinah, they call it, which, of course, Dinah Shore it's based on. She wasn't a lesbian. But 20,000 lesbians in the desert welcoming the world without men. I mean, remember now, when you have them pushing this, not only in school, for here in California, they got to teach these alternate lifestyles as part of your education, sex education. It's not an alternative lifestyle. How many different categories do you think the United Nations has for sexual orientation now? It's not 2 or 3. It's 30.
Well, there was one school where I think it was middle school district in the United States. In their middle school, the school district, the books were talking about 52 choices. I mean, it was straight, and I can't even. And the last one was other. So now these are kids. These are kids who are just beginning. Their hormones are just beginning to kick in, and you've got a teacher, a person in authority with his textbook saying there's all these different ways and they're all equal. What kind of nonsense is that, and why are Americans allowing this filth to be shoved on their children?
Exactly, yeah. Well, they're allowing it for some fairly simple reasons.
We've gone down the politically correct road way, way too far. Political correctness is not and never has been the American way. It's a lie. It's a satanic lie. You know, okay, Bill, say, you say to me, and we'll say your name is Fred, okay? You say, well, you know, I like to knock over, you know, a 5 and 10, a convenience store every once in a while, get a little pocket change, buy some dope, and I really, really like to pop a couple people in the head or whatever, you know, and if I can make it miserable for them before I kill them, I just have a need to do that once or twice a week, and I can't help it. God made me that way. Oh, well, Fred, if God made you that way, and who are we to say, you know? Who are we to judge?
Tim, there's actual Christian churches teaching that now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
God made you that way, man. You can't help it. Now,
I would disagree with you on that. They're not Christian.
I can tell you, as a neuroscientist and as a doctor, there is no genetic, hormonal, or neuroscientific fact that makes somebody gay. Gay is a learned behavior, okay? It can be traumatic because you've been raped by an uncle or a priest. It's something where perhaps you've been exposed to toxins, which you can detoxify and you can change the behavior. Remember now, it's a part of an addictive behavior. Just like people can become obsessive compulsive. And, of course, a lot of the toxins in our world are causing more and more bizarre behavior. Part of the reason why people are in their current state
also,
is because
there are toxins and chemicals that are reducing the male sex drive, and this may have
let me give you a few facts here. Most of the toxins in the world are what's called endocrine disruptors. They have an effect there where they're basically analogs of the female hormone, but they attach to the female hormone receptor 200 to 300 times more avidly than female hormones. So if you have a bisphenol A, which is in these BPA in these different cans we talked about in the first hour, in the second hour, I mean, or you have halides, which are chloride, fluoride, and bromide, because you got fluoridated, brominated, or chlorinated water. All of these are endocrine disruptors, and what they do is you actually look at male hormone levels and sperm counts since the 1950s have dropped dramatically. I think overall there's been more than a 50% drop in sperm count. 25% of couples that are, quote, otherwise healthy, we're not talking about ones that have had sexually transmitted disease caused-induced infertility. They are infertile because the male cannot produce enough male hormone. So if you actually tested these males, you'd find they had high levels of these endocrine disruptors. They'd had learned behaviors on top because when they start acting female because they don't have male hormone activity. For example, if I give you a drug, and let's say you've got cancer, and you've had a certain receptor-positive breast cancer, I can give you drugs that will actually block your hormones, whether it's male or female. So if you've got a tumor, for example, that's receptor-positive, I can block it and change your behavior. So my guess is we're seeing a convergence of deterioration of culture, deterioration of biology, deterioration of spirituality that's encouraging addictive behavior on the top of a toxic body and abnormal neural pathways of disrupted hormones. Joined here momentarily with Chris Harris. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I want you to go over these three articles. Some of them are so shocking, it's like, you got to be kidding. Let's go over some of the details. The last one, I don't even want to steal your thunder. It's so bizarre, it's like you better be sitting down for this. Please tell us.
Well, I think the most important one was that after a lot of modifications on the ice wall, that's why I put
right.
that, are they stone walling or are they going to do ice wall? There's a few key points in that I'd like to discuss. Whether, of course, technically, is it going to really work? Is it really going to minimize the flow outward from the contaminated water that's really basically just flooded inside of the right. plants themselves? But also, the really interesting is now they have permission to light it off. I was going to say just start it up, but they're going to leave a little bit of a space so they can figure out if it's really working, so that they don't cause any more damage. But the one thing is, the really bottom line is that the people of Japan are going to pay for this $278 million. And I think the important takeaway from this is, I bet you that extra $15 million for that seawall that they were going to that they didn't build a long time ago seems pretty cheap right now.
Right.
So yeah, and what the interesting thing is, it's always the people that are going to get stuck with it no matter what, and that's by decree. So I thought that was kind of a pertinent point to bring out. What else did you?
Well, I think the first thing I think, number one, let's go through the stone wall or ice wall. Number one, the ice wall was designed around small areas of slurry from settling ponds of the debris from coal mining. Coal mine slurry is not hot like radioisotopes, number one, because there's a residual heat there. And you can puncture holes in the so-called ice wall with the radioisotopes still cooking away. So that's one of the major defects. The second thing is the size of the wall is so enormous, I don't think they can do a proper diversion project. What they should have been doing is thinking of how they could put concrete pylons down to the ground, the bedrock, so they can divert the water away from the site so that literally the aquifer doesn't flow down from the mountains and go right through and carry that water through to Fukushima. So that's number one. Number two, they should have built a lower catchment basin below Fukushima Daiichi before it goes into the open ocean. And they should also have surveillance to do ground-penetrating radar to see if there's what we call steam tubes, because the hot radiotoxins that are in this lava, you would call lava lamp, underneath Fukushima Daiichi, are creating steam tubes that are very similar to the steam tubes you see from volcanism, say, in Hawaii Island. Those tubes can carry out many hundreds of yards and or even miles out to the seafloor and then emerge, spewing out radiation in these tubes because they're creating tritiated high pressure steam that can cut through rock or anything. In fact, you can cut the most hardened metals in the world with high pressure steam. People don't realize that steam can cut anything. So what's going on is they're not doing either to stop the seafloor from releasing this. They're not tracking the corium with ground penetrating radar or proper muon detectors. They're not doing anything to reduce the neutron flux, and they're not doing anything to not only stop the water coming into Fukushima, but also going through on the other side to catch it in the catchment basin before it goes out to the open ocean. Those are the framed issues. Okay, number two, you have the TEPCO curiously avoiding prosecution on containment of water leak. Tell us about that story. And then the last one is the one that's the most nuts.
Well, this one is something that we had brought to your attention. You heard it. I think you've heard it first from us, that the tanks that they were constructing, those bolted flange tanks, we said inadequate, totally inadequate for the job. And a couple of years ago, of course, the big deal was that they were leaking and that the water was making it to the Pacific Ocean. And if you and I had a eyedropper full of the same contaminated water, and we just go ahead and put an eyedropper full into your Pacific on your side or the Atlantic on my side, well, that's it. We would have been arrested right away and thrown in prison and everything else if we had that same level of contamination and we did that. Of course, the government there decided that they were going to originally bring TEPCO to court and to hold them responsible and all. That case seems to be quietly dismissed and gone away. So I mean, really, it's just a matter of some people the law doesn't apply to, some people it does. And that's just an example of it right there.
Well, it's not. It's lawlessness, and we call it the law. It's not law at all. It's lawlessness, because if it doesn't agree with what I call the biblical principles of responsibility, logic, and proper legal proceedings, then it's lawlessness. The last story is the one about the wild boars. This is pretty weird. Radioactive wild boars, and I've seen the story in a couple of places, are rampaging around the Fukushima nuclear site, and they're multiplying like crazy. Why aren't they controlling these radioactive wild boars? And I see the picture of these guys. They're not exactly passive and small. They're dangerous. I mean, I think they got tusks and everything, don't they?
Well, they sure develop tusks. Well, everybody, I guess, Arkansas, the Razorbacks and all that. Yeah,
they can rip you apart in literally seconds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing is, I put that in because we couldn't ignore the really what it is saying is that the contamination that's been spread all over the natural areas there has not been cleaned up, and of course you're going to get radioactive contaminated animals. And since the people weren't allowed to go in there and to hold population of some of it's just like a deer population around here. They're all over the place, and they minimize hunting, and lo and behold, you get a lot of deer population, running around the streets, getting hit by cars and causing damage and everything else. Well, what you got out there, I guess, is that's just one typical. That's just one animal that's running around, and and it's radioactive because, of course, it's living in the natural air, rolling around in the foliage and everything else. And so really what it is that they've stopped managing the wildlife there, and it's actually damaging a lot of the other. It's a side effect. Let's put it that way. You know, of course, the news is saying, well, they're radioactive. Well, they are. I mean, you know, they're contaminated. But the really important part is that the people aren't there anymore. They've been evacuated, and they can't steward the land like they're supposed to do. And we're seeing the side effects are pretty severe. That's
Chris. There's a article today on E&E News, Energy News. Let me read the headline. They always have long headlines here. Nuclear engineer, alarm bells are going off over Fukushima plume coming to U.S. West Coast. People will be dying from radiation is flowing across the Pacific. Massive amounts of nuclear waste are flowing into the ocean every day and will for more than a century. We've contaminated the biggest source of water on the planet, and there's no way to stop it. And they're referring to Arnie Gutherson. Arnie's no slouch. I mean, you know, he's. But then again, you know, we've been saying that it's basically a waste generation facility with no off switch at this point for years now, and you know, Arnie's on board with that too. That's.
Yeah, you know, I want to say a couple of things about this and get your opinion while you're here, Chris. The Keshe Foundation keeps them coming up with shoveling horse manure. That would be the best term. Saying that they have technology to get rid of it in the oceans and using subatomic particle physics to actually get rid of the isotopes in the ocean. They're lying nuts. Do not believe anything the Keshe Foundation says. They have all this technology to create ocean energy from something the size of a thermos bottle or something the size of a trash can for a home that doesn't require any fuel or anything.
Why don't they do it?
They don't. They keep on promising and promising. Now they promise they actually have a technology that's currently getting rid of the ocean. Now, theoretically, it could be done, but because they don't disclose it and have other scientists openly saying, oh yeah, this is how it works, they're liars. And there's no evidence whatsoever that it's going away. The problem is, you see, even if there's a steady stream of this radiation, it's bioaccumulating. When you bioaccumulate, it means if the isotopes, say, last, a couple hundred years, or for, say, 30, 40 years, it takes 4 half-lives to reduce it, even if it's stopped to a level which is considerably lower. That means that if it stopped today, with cesium and strontium alone, and that doesn't include things like plutonium, the plutonium has a half-life of 24,900 years, which means to stop the effect of plutonium, if it stopped today, it would take 100,000 years to drop to a significantly lower level. That's why 4 half-lives of radioiodine-131 takes 4 times 8 days, which is about a month, if it stopped, but it's not stopping. So the bioaccumulation is occurring in I call radiological desertification of the North Pacific. It's bioaccumulating in people so their health is getting less, and viruses are mutating faster, and pathogens are getting worse, and fertility is dropping, and inflammatory changes in people's bodies, including diabetes, dementia, autism, all these other conditions is increasing because there's a continual attack on mitochondrial and oxidative stress on every living thing in the world, not just the Northern Hemisphere. It's worse in the Northern Hemisphere, but everything in the world. And this is all by design, and there's no attempt to stop the building of new fission reactors. Rosatom from Russia and the American nuclear industry under Obama just sold last year to India $182 billion worth of new reactors, by the way, generate more radioisotopes that can make potentially nuclear weapons. So this is all satanic.
Well, and Dr. Bill, if you ask the average person, what about all this pollution, this deadly pollution that's killing the Pacific and going across North America for Fukushima? They would say, what? Fukushima? Yeah, don't you remember Fukushima? Well, I guess there was one. Yeah, a few years ago they had something there. I mean, honestly, it's not even on the radar screen for probably 85% of the people.
I had my wife help me to revise my little, I call consciousness list. The top level are people aware and prepared, and they're preparing both physically and spiritually. That's the people like us, or people listening to the program saying, they don't know everything, but at least they're asking questions and trying to seek the truth. The second group are the people that we call are scared and paralyzed. They know enough that things are wrong, but they're paralyzed. They're not going to do anything about it. The third group are the people basically Pollyannas. They're not even aware and prepared. They're kind of dancing through the daisies. And the last group are what we call the viciously ignorant. They don't want you to raise the issues at all because it upsets them. They have an agenda that's usually evil. They don't want you to expose it to their friends and relatives. They don't want you to expose it to them to make them change their mind. They want to continue doing evil. And part of that evil is to hide the truth from themselves and everybody around them. And they get angry as heck at you if you actually raise issues. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
and you're an idiot. You're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, you say, look, I mean, these are facts.
It doesn't matter if you actually take out the written document and shove it in their face. They're going to start spitting curses at you because you dared to show them facts. Okay? So what's happening is we have a suicidal portion of our population. Most of them are very evil. They're not just ignorant, they're what we call viciously ignorant because they know better. And unfortunately, most of our population are passive, just like in Islam. The primary problem with Islam is why it's dangerous, and we talked about this with Bill Warner, is because 98% of them are passive and beaten down by Sharia law and the way that the Quran and Islam works. So they're not interested. They really don't want to do murder or Sharia law and all this other stuff, but they won't stop it in their own organization. So that's why 72% of mosques in America are radicalized by the 1 or 2% that are nuts. And, if you have 100,000 people come in and say 20 of them are terrorists that'll blow themselves up with a nail bomb or a dirty bomb or whatever, and they're going to go to, say, O'Hare International Airport or the Mall of the Americas, you got a problem. And the problem is Obama wants that problem because he wants to be president for life. So in this year,
Obama hasn't hardly let in any Christians from the Middle East who are being persecuted and yet he opens the flood doors to all the Muslims.
Well, the reason for that is I have a Christian from Iraq who's an American. He's an American and has for 7 years been pursued by Obama and the Department of Injustice to try to literally put him in prison for bringing Christians in from Syria and Iraq, and they say they don't have a serious problem in Syria and Iraq that they need to come here. And here in California, and we have lots of Christians that are being blocked from coming in.
I'll tell you, there's a world of difference between Christian Arabs and Muslim Arabs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Obama's a monster.
Yep. So is Hillary.
Yeah, exactly.
And Bernie.
So is Bernie, yeah. Pretty scary stuff.
Yep. Chris, you're in, Virginia, or the East Coast area? Chris, you still there?
He did a segment. He's flown the coop. I can hear his wings flapping. I'm pretty bad. Eh? His flapping wings are. He's flown the coop. That bird's gone.
It's. Where do you want to go with the last segment?
Well, one of the things I talked about in the first thing is Wisconsin is gone. The people there are nice, but they're actually pretty. They got to be pretty slow if they accept the BS from Cruz. Oh, really?
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So here we are. Okay, we're live. With Wisconsin, I'm really disturbed by the fact that they didn't get it. That Ted Cruz is actually a liar. That he actually is going to bring the nation. In fact, we played some clips in the first hour with reverse speech on Ted Cruz. This man it makes my skin crawl. He
was a cross-dresser in college, and he was a. What do you call them when they peep in the windows? Peeping Tom.
Wow.
I helped catch a peeping Tom one time. I was a volunteer fireman, and I was a township official. We started our own volunteer fire department, and I was the chief inspector. And I had a couple of other inspectors, and we would do inspections of businesses and schools and so forth in our township. And I had a police-type uniform, with badge on and on. I'd been out inspecting, and I came home to at the time, my wife and I lived in an apartment, and was walking my dog, Muffy, who was a very, very smartest little animal I've ever known. And he was very instinctive about people. He could tell good people from bad people. And his hair stood up, and he started barking, and some guy was running. He ran across the street in his cornfield with another guy after him. And I thought, what the heck? And anyway, the guy pulls the other guy out, and he says, I caught him. I said, what's going on? He says, well, arrest him. I said, I'm a volunteer fireman, not a cop. But we took him to the outside of my apartment, and he said, well, let's take him in and hold him. And my wife was in there. I said, no. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'2", and pretty big, and I kind of gently, well, not so gently, kind of pressed him up against the brick wall and said, if you move, I'm going to rip your blankety-blank head off. And about that time, a buddy of mine on the department who was a police officer, a sergeant of the sheriff's department, who was rushing past us, and I yelled at him, and he said, I've got to go. I said, we got the guy right here. Take him in. And what I didn't know is, and I was told this, that generally these guys, when they are peeping Toms, what they're actually doing is they're masturbating. And I mean, that's a very, very sick.
Well, we know
and
that
all the people that knew Cruz in high school, and his fellow senators, who I might add, many of them are as dirty and as scummy as can be. They hate the guy. He creeps them out. People that know him get really creeped out by this guy.
Well, apparently he's had at least say 8 different sexual trysts outside his marriage, and the man has been involved with a lot of stuff.
8 or 800.
Well, at least 8. And, you know, what we have in Ted Cruz is he says one thing and he does the opposite. He'll cover up things like his personal loan to Goldman Sachs. He'll cover up the fact that he wants to talk about looks, which is why he had a super PAC, which is illegal, to release this photo. Which, by the way, I heard the photo was originally acquired by what's his name?
Rubio? Huh?
Rubio. Little Rubio. And
oh, boy, Rubio.
Yeah, exactly. And so what they wanted to do is they knew that one of the weaknesses of Trump is he's a counterpuncher, which is not smart. It's okay in business, but you don't counterpunch if to look presidential. So both his wife and daughter are telling him, you know, we're going to take away your Twitter account. So Ted Cruz is creepy. Hillary is evil. And Bernie Sanders is a brainless communist. I call him an American Bolshevik. And if you want a Bolshevik revolution in America, you have a President Sanders, you're going to have a hell of a mess on this country. First off, what will happen is you'll have a lot of people migrate here. In the next 20 years, you'd have another 100 million people, all expecting benefits right off the bat, and collapse in the economy. And the states where people are permitted...
You mean like in Europe, from North Africa? And...
Right. Now, by the way, some states won't do that. So, for example, the state of Arizona is not taking on new people. They're not allowing it. And here in California, though, we're having a massive flood of them. In fact, right opposite my daughter's old school, because she's now out of school a few years, there's another new mosque that's going up. And when we've driven by it, including their teacher, there are only men there. There's no women. I wonder, where are the burqas? Where are the kids? None. It's all men. Like, that's creepy. All men at a mosque, and you hear them out there praying and so on, thinking, oh my gosh, this is just right behind my daughter's old special needs school. So, the thing is, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton want open borders. They push all the LBG...
why don't we be honest about it? They want to destroy America with open borders.
Right.
That's really what it's about. It's a calculated effort to destroy American culture, American society, the American economy, the American way of life, American Christian-based religions. That's what it's all about.
Right. Well, you see, it's not just that, though. If you get rid of religion, you can create a totalitarian state. And tomorrow I have my son Matthew, and I have to kind of control him because he can go off on a tangent. But he's a very intelligent guy, but I have him putting together some pretty amazing facts about the mark of the beast. And we're heading there. And I'm going to say this as not a boast, but as a fact. Okay, and people need to know the difference between competency and arrogance. There's not a person who has ever lived on Earth who has a pulse that knows more about the technical and spiritual facts of the mark of the beast than I do. Now, that's not funny, because it's coming quickly. In Europe, if you look at the number of cashless societies are rising, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, etc. If you look at the factors, if they have a major terrorist activity, you know how they're going to make it safe so you can go to a shopping center? Everybody's going to have a chip or some way, a tattoo or something.
I was just about to say that, yes.
A chip or tattoo.
And what does the Bible say about that? The mark of the beast is necessary to buy or sell?
that he who does not have the mark of the beast shall not buy or sell, save they have the mark. Now, that's one of my big whys, is why I'm pushing Carrot Bars, because Carrot Bars allows you to do electronic transactions and to have gold-backed currency that's separate from all the fractional reserve currencies and credit cards. All the credit cards now move to put a chip in their things. We used to have, for example, we have the thing used to be called a Visa Black Card, and we didn't apply because if you're high enough credit, they actually send you a request saying, hey, you're high enough credit, we'll give you this black card. They switched to what's called MasterCard, and you can't refuse the fact that now all these cards have chips in them. So they can track you. They know where the heck you are just because the card has readers everywhere. You walk into a shopping center, walks through the doors, and the card literally talks to the store and says,
but
yes,
you can buy billfolds that block it.
I know that, and that's why they're here on Genesis. You can actually get that. So what I want people to grasp is that we are only a couple baby steps away from the mark of the beast.
That is correct. The pop-up, what do you call them, pop-ups that you put in a toaster, at least they used to, I guess they still do, come in a little package that's aluminum on the inside.
Right.
If you put cards or a cell phone in there, it will block the radio transmissions coming and going.
Right, but I think you've got to understand that there's all kinds of fraud now. Fraud on PayPal, fraud on credit cards, fraud in your bank accounts, and a lot of people are trying to buy these anti-fraud things. What you have to understand is they make things wide open, and they create a situation where you can lose your identity or someone can steal your things, so that you require more and more identification and biometrics, so eventually you move into a biometric system where there's no such thing as physical cash anymore. You can't give your kid $20 because you actually have to electronically transfer.
And just as in Germany, if you have the audacity to complain about the Muslim rapists coming into your country, they raid your house, well, they can also in the future say, delete your bank account, any money you have, your existence, and try to buy some food after that.
Well,
try to pay your utility bills.
Exactly.
You're out of luck. That's the monster system they're coming. We have to support Trump. He's the only person that is standing up to this evil nonsense. You got to get off your butts, people. You got to do something about this because it's our lives. It's our future.
Yeah, and we're not very far away from it. All we need is an event between now and Election Day, and there won't be an election. And if they put the wrong person, Cruz, Hillary, or Sanders in there, and we are doomed.
Yep.
Take care. Back tomorrow. A firing line.